Emily, thank you for your time today. Could we start with a quick introduction? Who are you? Who do you work for? And what's your job title?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Emily Kies. I'm the Senior Director of Emergency Management at Elgin Community College, which is just outside of Chicago, Illinois.
Brilliant, thank you. And tell us a bit about Elgin Community College itself. How big is it in terms of the number of students and the ground that it covers?
Yeah, absolutely. So Elgin Community College has been around since 1949, and we actually just hit our highest number of students. We have around 11,000 students, and all of them are what we consider commuter. We're commuter college. So none of our students live on campus. They all come from the surrounding area to one of three different campuses that we have around Chicagoland. So we have our main campus, which is on a couple hundred acres, and then we have an emergency services center, which is in a town across from us. And then we've got a small rental space in another town that we actually partner with another college. And so these students come from, again, all over the surrounding community. And actually, we're considered a minority majority college, which means that the majority of our student population is made up by demographic minorities. So think English as a second language. They might not have a permanent resident status. They might not look the same demographically as you or I. And so that is the majority of our students.
That's super interesting. And I know from a previous visit that Elgin has its own police team, force in the college. So there's a sense of infrastructure there that is going to be very different to our audience in the UK or France or Germany.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say that colleges definitely are a really small community. And so we reside in the city of Elgin, but we have our own culture. We have our own emergency notification system. We have about 1,500 employees, and we have our own police force that patrols just our campus. And so everything across the board is sort of reduced, but still really applicable from like a community perspective. So we have our own rules and regulations. A really fun one is that if you get a parking ticket on our campus, you can rectify that with the police department by making a donation to the local food pantry. You don't get that in a large metropolitan city. And so, but it's this policy, it's standing, and so it's legally binding on our campus. And so it makes it very unique and very different while residing still within the city of Elgin.
I love that. That's really, really good. And tell us a bit about your career journey to date. How have you ended up in the position that you now occupy at Elgin?
Yeah, so really passionate about emergency management. And I like to say that I fell into it, which does happen. But I started out, I was working at a large big box store, as we'll call them here in the States. And an elderly individual fell in the parking lot. And I was one of the few people that was trained in first aid and CPR. And so I happened to be there, called the ambulance. This individual ended up breaking their rib, their wrist, and had a contusion. So
Wow.
It was a gnarly fall. And after that, I was like, I should really get recertified in CPR and first aid and sort of being able to assist should I come across an emergency. And the local Red Cross was where I went to go get that training. And during the class, they were like, hey, do you want to be part of this disaster action team? We respond to home fires. And it was like drinking Kool-Aid. And so I absolutely signed up. I thought that sounded really cool. I recognize that my version of cool might not be everyone else's, but I thought that was just really neat. And then in that, I started learning about incident command systems and stateside, the National Incident Management System. And it was this structure and framework to respond to emergencies. So it was really bringing order and consistency to chaos. And that, again, I just thought that was really interesting and really exciting. And so I started working for the Red Cross. I actually switched at that point and started working for them full time. And then from there, I was there about 6 years, and then I became the emergency manager for a local municipality. So I was able to go from nonprofit to government. And then actually our police chief and I worked at the same municipality. He moved into chief of police at Elgin Community College, and he called me up and he said, hey, they have this position. It really seems like something that would be a good fit for you. And I interviewed, and it was a great opportunity. And so I moved over there about 8 years ago and have been building and implementing the emergency management program in higher ed, which has been a wild ride and very fun. And definitely was able to take a lot of experience from Red Cross and from local and be able to implement it again in an environment and in a culture that is quite different. And so being able to sort of translate what emergency management is in one sector and in local government, and then really how to apply it and make it meaningful and actionable in higher ed, always while considering the culture of higher ed. And so that's been a fun challenge.
Yeah, I love your passion for this, and it kind of carries through. I've seen this firsthand into your approach to not just implementing emergency management sort of procedures and protocols, but also in the way that you test and exercise with your colleagues as well. So what are the I think most of the people watching this will understand the benefits of exercising, but what are the challenges in an education setting around emergency management exercises?
The first one that always I like to tell that was very amusing is that because I'm working with educators, we run exercises specifically to find gaps. Our goal is to figure out what needs to be tweaked. And in education, you test to prove what you know. And so the first time exercise in higher ed, we got done and they asked me what their grade was. And that really caught me by surprise and made me giggle, because I tried to explain again that no, it was a good thing that we found these gaps and that we found these areas we needed to improve upon. And they're really adamant. And so finally I gave up and I said, fine, you got a B+ to sort of give them like, you know, we achieved most of our objectives. Yes. And, but really, I think what was really profound and really trying to get across in higher ed was that the goal of this exercise is to test and validate plans, policies, and procedures. But what we want to find was what didn't work, not prove how much we know of what did work. And so it took some coaching, it took some education to convey that concept. But once they got it, and once they understood it was a place, right, we call the no-fault environment, and that you could be trusted to say, this didn't work, I don't know, we can do better, that was a positive outcome. They've taken that and they've run with it. So that mental shift took a little bit, but it's worked out great. And now they get really excited, and exercises are a big hit on campus.
That's great, thank you. And stepping back from exercises for a moment, you've been at Elgin 8 years, you said?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And therefore in the wider education emergency management community as well. In that time, what's been the change in the impact of social media on your kind of preparedness in Elgin or in the kind of education community more broadly?
Yeah, the biggest impact is that individuals need to realize that they have to get in front of that social media message fast, and you have to be accurate, and you have to do it immediately. I think that prior, kind of coming up through that, it was sort of like, yeah, it was off to the side. It was something that was relevant, but you had time to get to it, or it was just chatter. It was just something where people were talking about what was going on, but it didn't have significant impact in your response. And that has started to change. And a really good example of that is we actually had a train derailment in the States. Most people, I think, might have heard of the East Palestine train derailment. And the social media mis and disinformation that came out from that, I got to listen to one of the responders, and he lamented about how challenging that made their response on the ground, from drones trying to be overhead to catch pieces of it, his own daughter calling him and asking him if the conspiracy theories were true.
Wow.
Was this an act of, that the government had done this on purpose, or, just there was real wildfire of conspiracy theories, all the way towards when they were working to extradite all of the contaminated soil, that it really threw up a lot of barriers, and it created a lot of challenges in their ability to continue to respond to that. And it was all stemming from social media. And so they, in hindsight, one of the lessons learned was, they said, you have got to get out there. You've got to address the rumors. You've got to address the mis and disinformation, and you have to have somebody doing it immediately and all the time, all throughout the response, because it'll change. And then somebody will hear something and it will just catch, and you'll just run with it. So really giving a lot of attention to that, and recognizing that if you don't, I really like the phrase, it becomes the tail that wags the dog. And I think that was really evident from this, and just seeing that in recent years.
That's really interesting. Thank you. And then the final question really is, if I'm the principal or the emergency manager for a college or university here in Europe or the Middle East, for example, and I'm just starting out on this journey of rigorous emergency management for my campus, what would be your kind of 2 or 3 tips? What are the priority things that I should be thinking about?
So I think right off the bat is understanding that any plans that you develop, you're planning with people and not for them. And so I really encourage, sit down and start having the what if conversations, because a plan documents decisions you've already made. And so I think that there's a desire to, okay, we need to have a plan. And it's like, well, it's not really worth anything on paper if you haven't had the conversation leading up to those decisions. Like, you're just documenting something that you've already decided or you've already talked about. So really the planning process is really vital, and that takes meetings and it takes work. And so I think really sitting down and putting the effort into the planning process, if you're going to start to engage in, you have this idea that you need to have a plan, an emergency response plan, an emergency operations plan, a building response plan. I've heard them called all sorts of different things, but the value lies in the planning process. Truly, Eisenhower said that plans were useless, that planning was indispensable. And so I think that that's really critical right off the bat. The other thing is, you have to take your culture into consideration. I think far too often, you can have a great strategy. You can go to a conference, or you can work with a subject matter expert, and they can give you a fantastic strategy to implement. But if you don't recognize how that's incorporated into your culture, again, another favorite quote is that strategy will eat culture, or culture will eat strategy's lunch every day of the week. And so if you have a culture on campus of, especially in higher ed, we really like to have committees, and we like to take our time thinking through decisions, at least here stateside, or for myself, that was definitely a culture that I had to work with. And so accept those strategies, but be very cognizant of the culture that you have on your campus to implement those, and be willing to adjust and modify, because that's really going to get you your biggest success. And then I think that the third thing, if you're looking to implement something, is finding a champion. So having conversations with senior leadership, really the buy-in for this is going to come from senior leadership. So identifying, from an emergency standpoint, what keeps them up at night? What do they worry about? And then being willing and able to address those concerns from your senior leadership really starts to generate that buy-in. So when you want to run a large exercise, or when you want to put together a large planning committee, you have that support because they recognize the value in the program and in what you bring to the campus.
That's great. Emily, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate that.